with the Student Emergency Assistance Grants Program 2021-23 Request for Application webinar. Gosh, I am just really excited about the opportunity to continue this program and share a little more about what the application process is going to look like. So I'll go ahead and get us moving along here. We'll go ahead and start with staff introductions, and wanted to upfront let you know that you'll have the support of several state board staff during the development of your Student Emergency Assistance Grant SEAG program applications and throughout implementation. So let's meet some of the folks you'll be working with now. And I'm going to go ahead and just give this a shot here. I'm going to go ahead and just try to introduce myself and turn on my video so that you can see me. So let's see if that's going to work. I think it's working. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Porter, and I'm the program coordinator for the Student Emergency Assistance Grants Program. I'm also the program coordinator for the student supporting students experiencing homelessness pilot. And so I'll be your main contact as you have any questions related to the application content, any feedback, reports, allowable expenses, ideas, resources. I just wanted to kind of say hi to everyone. I know some of you have kind of met me in some of these virtual spaces, but some of you might not be as familiar with me. So I just wanted to kind of just let you know who you'll be contacting throughout this process. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the rest of our team for introductions.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Caitlin Orellana, and I'm the Integrations Coordinator supporting all of our student support programs and student services.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dylan Jillick, Contract Specialist with Grants and Contracts for the State Board. And among many other duties, I review your budgets for this funding opportunity.
Hi there, I'm Carrie Kaufman. I'm available to answer any questions about working on and submitting your application in OGMS, the online grant management system.
Thanks, everyone. As always, we really love to know who we have in attendance from our system. So please take a moment to share your name and college in the chat. That way we can hopefully follow up with you and reach out to you if we haven't heard from you. And I think we have someone maybe unmuted. So if you could, I'm sorry, I can't see who's unmuted, but if you could remain muted for this first part of the presentation, we will get to questions and answers a little bit later. So just anything you can do to help us reduce any background sound. Again, my apologies for not turning off the entry chime for folks joining us, but I did want to also, before we move on, I wanted to acknowledge that we've had some changes in our staffing here at the State Board, and wanted to let you know that the SEAG program is also supported by Jennifer Dillinger, who's our relatively new policy associate on the student support programs end, and certainly Jennifer is not new to student support programs. She was formerly the program administrator, but has now moved into her new role as a policy associate. So I also wanted to share that the SEAG program is also supported by Denise Costello, who is our policy associate on the fiscal team. So now that we've gotten introductions out of the way, I'll go ahead and move us along here. So let's review what we'll be discussing in today's webinar. We'll be providing a funding overview We'll look at where this funding is coming from and its intended purposes. We'll also be discussing or review how to access applications in the online grant management system, as well as program requirements, budget forms, eligible expenses, and other details that will help you know how to apply for SEAG program funding and understand how applications will be evaluated. And we'll also be taking some time, hopefully, to review your questions and answers. So please type those questions into the chat box as we go along, and we will attempt to address them at the end of today's presentation. Again, if you can remain muted during the presentation, that will help us reduce any background noise and help with just staying focused through the presentation part. We would love to invite your questions at the end, so there will hopefully be an opportunity for you to unmute and ask them when time comes. We do only have an hour to cover the information that we prepared for today, so if we run out of time before we can address all of your questions, we will follow up with you offline and update the Q&A content, which can be accessed from our Student Emergency Assistance Grants funding webpage. And we understand you'll likely have additional questions as you work on your proposals. So we will remind you at the end of today's webinar how you can submit further questions and where you can find the Q&A document updates throughout the application process. Okay, so where is this funding coming from? The Washington State Legislature passed the second substitute House Bill 1893 in 2019, which contains several sections that addressed increasing supports for students' basic needs. Section 1 of the bill established the Emergency Assistance Grant Program to provide community and technical colleges or college students monetary aid to assist them with unforeseen emergency situations that can affect their ability to attend classes. For example, SEAG program funding can be used to assist students with paying for all kinds of emergency expenses, including food, transportation, childcare, other goods and services needed to continue attending classes. Emergency aid under this program is considered a grant, and students cannot be required to reimburse the college. SEAG program funds are allocated to the colleges in a 2-year funding cycle. This is a competitive application process, which means awards will be based on the amount of resources available and the number of qualified applications approved for funding. We will talk a little more about what this could look like when we discuss program budgets in more detail. Competitive applications must demonstrate need. So what can you share about what you know in terms of your students' needs at your college, the needs of different students attending your college, and any resources available to address those needs. We will be doing our best to match available resources to the demonstrated needs within our system. The more you can help us understand the gaps in available resources and services will help us award funds appropriately. Competitive applications must also ensure that students' access to emergency aid funds will be as low barrier as possible. We are aware of some systemic barriers to emergency aid that the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges is working to address at a broader policy level. And in the meantime, we've seen some colleges successfully mitigate these barriers at the local level. So whatever you can do to illustrate your college's commitment to reducing barriers to student access throughout the process from application to disbursement will strengthen your application. Competitive applications must also allow flexibility in who may apply for funds. All enrolled students who are experiencing an emergency are eligible, not just those who meet the definition of financial need. And competitive applications will also indicate how the CTC will prioritize the disbursement of emergency aid funds. Some additional information that is important for colleges to be aware of as you apply for funds is that selected colleges may not require a student to fill out the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, to receive assistance. As per the legislation, students are required to submit requests in writing. However, no other documentation of need is or should be required. And the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges will facilitate submission of the required annual reports to the legislature by December 1st of each year. The SEAG program colleges will comply with all reporting requirements to assist the State Board in this effort. So let's review some important dates regarding this funding opportunity. As you probably already know, the request for application was released on April 15th. We have a Q&A that we rolled over from the last request for application process, and we'll be updating this document with new questions through May 6th. We will discuss where you can find that document shortly. Applications are due by 11:55 p.m. on May 13th, and State Board staff will only be available until 4 p.m. to assist you. Please note this is 1 week after the supporting students experiencing homelessness pilot applications are due. So if you're also applying for that funding opportunity, we would advise that you probably prioritize that application first and then move on to your SEAG application. Obviously, it's up to you how you manage those deadlines, but we certainly do invite all colleges to apply for both opportunities. We are working to ensure selected colleges are notified no later than mid-June, and are working through some internal processes to get the funds included in or as close to the first allocation of the year. Next, we will discuss some of the guiding principles behind the SEAG program design. So in developing your program proposals and applications, please consider the following principles that the review committee will want to see integrated into your design. Emergency assistance, we're aware, is not new to any of you. Many of the colleges are heavily involved in the disbursement of emergency aid due to the pandemic and crisis response efforts. So many of these program principles are probably also not new to you, but it is worth reviewing with you at this time. So right off the bat, we emphasize the importance of trusting students. So administering these grants to students will require your college to create safe spaces for students to ask for help. College and faculty staff will need to trust student requests for assistance without requiring documented proof beyond the stated need. Be timely with your processing and disbursement of funds. So financial emergencies can derail a student's future in a matter of days. A key component of this funding is to enable colleges to respond and address students' emergency needs more quickly and efficiently. Creating a network of support for students in need is one of the most important endeavors within the SEAG program. Colleges need a plan to support students beyond one-time emergency assistance to help remedy underlying causes of need and to support student resiliency and persistence in college. Also, a key guiding principle is to be free of bias and aware of bias where it occurs and any related discrimination. So the SEAG program staff should demonstrate a commitment to equity, reduce stigma associated with asking for help, and ensure decisions are free from bias. Another guiding principle is around tracking outcomes and providing follow-up. So colleges will be required to report on a minimum set of data elements related to student and program information, and should be considered. It should consider additional data collection elements that will inform program design and reporting to the legislature. Consideration should be given to the process of data collection in a way that maintains the low barrier intentions of this program. Another principle is leveraging available resources. Colleges should leverage available college and community financial resources to most effectively impact student success. And program delivery should also enhance student access and support. So colleges should design placement of dedicated SEAG program staff. I know this looks a little different in a virtual world, but think about how you make staff available to students to ensure equitable access and enhanced connection to other student supports and services. Opportunities to access the SEAG program should include options, well, obviously options beyond face-to-face and on-site, and should include online, phone, satellite campus, access points, etc. There's one common thread that runs through all of these program principles, and it's about connecting with students and connecting students with systems of support. This is even more critical within the remote and physically distanced environments that most of us are operating from, and poses additional challenges to this type of support. In addition to program design principles, we have also suggested several program delivery elements. The review committee will be evaluating your program design within the framework of the elements of these elements. So you will see each presented within the narrative questions in OGMS. You can think of these as steps within your SEAG program delivery process that we want to see you speak to directly within your applications. So number one, identifying students with financial needs. Students will most likely approach a faculty member, academic advisor, or other staff during a crisis. Colleges must have a plan in place to create student-centered, proactive frontline to identify and refer students to the SEAG program. Colleges must also describe their outreach plans and work toward normalizing processes for requesting help. The SEAG request process, a key component of this funding, is to enable colleges to respond and address students' emergency needs more quickly and efficiently. Colleges must strive for equitable and low barrier access to request processes and provide support throughout the request process to ensure students can complete their any applications or request processes. Review and decision processes. The review process must be transparent about identifying how decisions will be made and who will be involved, including award limits and ways for students to reapply. Decisions about requests must be made in a timely manner. These include backup plans for when key personnel are unavailable. Notification: students must be notified of approval or denial with next steps and additional resources to address their needs. Disbursement: colleges must disperse grants within 4 days or less. Examples of ways your college directly to the student: a check written to a third-party vendor, direct deposit to student's bank mobile account, and prepaid cards are the most common forms of disbursement that we're aware of. A special note: grants made under the SEAG program in response to students' written emergency assistance requests are not considered grants. The state board has confirmed this with the Attorney General's office, and we have remained committed to ensuring that the colleges are in compliance with all state regulations regarding gifting of state funds. Finally, follow-up. Colleges must follow up with the student at least within 10 days, and then again within 45 days. Follow-up should include referral to additional resources and serve as an opportunity to check in to see if the emergency has been addressed. As you design your program proposals, please keep in mind the review committee will be evaluating how equitable and low barrier access will be maintained for students. how quickly you will be able to connect students to the emergency funds they need, and how effectively you will connect students in need to other supportive services or programs to address underlying needs. All right, so let's dive into each section of the application. We've briefly discussed some of these pieces already, but this is another opportunity for us to clarify what we're looking for in each of these sections. So first, demonstrated need. This is an opportunity for your college to showcase what you know about your students' needs, including demographic data about student income, number of students experiencing food and housing insecurity or homelessness, number of students accessing your college's food pantry and other supportive services, and other specific information about your student population. At a minimum, we know that most of our colleges participated in the Hope Center's 2019 Real College Survey. And for those of you who did not participate, hopefully that was because you had an internal assessment tool that you were already utilizing. If you have more recent or long-term data available to you about students' needs, we certainly would welcome that information. We know that many of our colleges have been collecting additional data in response to the pandemic and disbursement of relief funds. So it certainly only strengthens your application and shows your commitment to understanding students' needs, the more information that you're able to provide in this section. In terms of capacity and commitment to leveraging existing student supports, what is your college already doing to identify and address students' needs, including during times of crisis or emergency in the students' lives? What is your college's current capacity to address students' needs? How will your college ensure collaboration internally across departments within your college and externally with community resources? What existing partnerships and referral agreements do you already have in place to connect students to additional support services? And for your plan of operation, please note that Section 3 covers all elements of your plan of operation, and each question corresponds with elements we have provided in the guidelines document. Please refer to the guidelines for recommendations as you develop your plan. The review committee is especially interested in how you address the following elements: how you ensure equitable access to SEAG funds. Obviously, we don't want these resources to be hidden from students or kind of something that they stumble upon. We want it to be, readily available for students to access, and we would like to see a process that reduces any stigma that surrounds or is involved with students asking for help. We are looking for plans that ensure access to funds is readily available beyond just accessibility, but also making sure you have a backup plan for staff absences. Also, a plan that ensures that the application process is low barrier as possible, and that students are supported throughout the process to increase application completion rates. We're looking for plans of operation that clearly identify people involved in the decision-making process and prioritization of funding. Plans that also ensure all students requesting supports are notified in a timely manner, regardless of the decision. And plans that also ensure that all students requesting assistance are connected to other support programs and services. And also plans that ensure time between request and decision and disbursement is as quick as possible. And finally, plans that ensure follow-up with students to address needs beyond emergency assistance request. Section 5 is just really an opportunity for you to lay out your implementation timeline. So what is a feasible time frame for your college to implement the SEAG program principles and delivery model for disbursement of funds? Please describe any reason immediate implementation may be delayed. Section 6 is where you can provide some information about your evaluation plan. So identify the kinds of data you will use to help you evaluate your programs. You will share additional specifics about data and reporting requirements toward the end of this presentation. And finally is the supporting documents section, which is super important. And there are a lot of components to this, so we will talk about this more, but your supporting documents will include your budget, assurances, and samples of your request and follow-up request form and follow-up survey. Okay, so let's start by talking about the budget template and what we are looking for in each of the categories. This funding opportunity has 3 main budget categories. For accounting, tracking, and reporting purposes, it's critical that things are budgeted on the correct budget lines and in the correct budget cells. The administration line is where you can budget up to 10% of the grant total for administrative expenses related to your program. These would include staff time for oversight of the SEAG program, administrative requirements for this funding opportunity, like completing application materials and reports, monitoring budgets, supervision of staff or faculty, and associated expenses. The student grants section of the budget, this category should account for the bulk of your budget. After all, the intention behind this funding opportunity is to address emergencies that students are experiencing that may prevent them from remaining enrolled. Hold on just a second. Sorry, my pup is just trying to say hi to the male person, so you might hear a little bit of background noise. So again, I wanted to just go over that section. The students grants piece is obviously the category that should account for the bulk of your budget. And that's because the intention behind this funding opportunity is to address emergencies that students are experiencing that may prevent them from remaining enrolled in classes. Finally, the final category is program supports, and these are costs associated with staff providing direct services to students related to this program, which may include case management, follow-up, and referrals. So the main difference between administration and program supports is that administration is really kind of more strictly to the administration involved in just managing this funding opportunity. So kind of like the administrative tasks of managing that piece. Program supports are really those direct supports that staff are providing to students. So they're the staff time that's spent connecting with students to connect them with SEAG program funding and additional resources. We have released the 2021-23 request for application under the constraints of the current SEAG program budget. So let's just talk a little bit about what that funding looks like. The current budget is set at 1.5 million for 2 years, and this is the amount that was retained in the proposed Senate and governor's budgets. The proposed House budget, on the other hand, included 14 million in funding for the SEAG program. So obviously there's a big difference there. We're keeping a close eye on the budget process, and we are hoping that the legislature will be able to finalize their operating budget by the end of the regular legislative session, which is April 25th. this weekend. So if we receive more than the current 1.5 million, we could be facing an opportunity to really be able to scale this program statewide. At 1.5 million, we don't have enough funding to fund all of our CTCs within the state. That is a major priority if funding is expanded. And also, as a part of expansions, would be looking at increasing the funding limits that each college is able to request. So currently, under the current 1.5 million, we've set funding limits at 50,000 per year, and that would obviously increase potentially if we're looking at a much larger budget. So please keep an eye out for any updates from us. And obviously, if we can incorporate changes into the application before the deadline, we will, and we'll notify you of those changes before then, as we have information available. And like I said, hopefully that will be coming soon this weekend. So moving on, the 2021-23 SEAG program 2-year budget forms. Please use the budget template that we have provided. You can find this budget template in the grant info link in the upper right-hand corner of your application screen when you log into OGMS. You'll also find the guidelines document in the grant info screen. Please note that the traditional budget matrix is not available in OGMS. You will click a checkbox on the budget tab for completion, but then fill out your budget in the provided Excel spreadsheet template. The SEAG request form and student follow-up survey, we have provided a sample SEAG request form in Appendix A of the guidelines, and a student follow-up survey in Appendix C. These are somewhat outdated. We included these the last time around, and now knowing that most of our colleges have already developed their own emergency aid applications that are far more sophisticated than what we provided, we just would encourage you to include a copy of whatever you plan to use. I will note that we have been utilizing the application as a tool to better understand and advocate for students' needs, which is why that section remains critical to the SEAG program, and must be able to, and we must be able to report this to legislators per the legislation. So the specific piece of the application that I'm speaking to right now is where students can indicate their specific needs, specific emergency needs. So if you can retain that section for your application process, that would be great. If you forget, don't sweat it, but we will be hopefully having an opportunity to workshop the applications as soon as we make our final funding decisions for the year and know which colleges will be participating for the next two funding, for the next 2-year funding cycle. You will also need to complete and upload the 2021-23 SEAG assurances. You will find the document for download in the assurances tab. And all attachments will need to be uploaded to the attachment section of the application in OGMS for us to consider your application complete. So you'll upload, so you'll need to upload those attachments to the attachments tab, which is on the right side of the OGMS screen. You can't delete files once they've been uploaded. Don't worry, we'll simply consider the most recent uploaded file as the file you intended to upload, or you can email us and let us know which file you need for us to use. Okay, so Let's go ahead and I'm going to give just a very high level piece on reporting requirements. Much more detailed information is included in the program guidelines. And the reason I'm giving you high level information right now is because we are working on our end to streamline our reporting processes and requirements going into this next 2-year funding cycle. So, so again, look for more information as we do some onboarding for the next 2-year funding cycle. But in Appendix B of the SEAG program guidelines, we have included some high-level details about what kinds of data selected colleges will be expected to gather. And this data includes student information, so demographic information about students utilizing your SEAG program, and program information, so data about how many students have submitted requests and the results of those requests. Selected colleges will be expected to submit quarterly reports by the end of the month following the end of the quarter of each quarter, and then year-end summative reports on July 31st of each year. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Carrie to briefly go over the online grant management system.
Okay, we'll now address some frequently asked questions about the online grant management system, which is OGMS, located at ogms.sbctc.edu. You'll apply for this funding using OGMS. If you don't have an account, you'll need to contact your college's OGMS security contact. They will create you an account. SBCTC staff cannot create OGMS accounts for college faculty and staff. The list of security contacts is linked in the slide, which we will make the PowerPoint available after the presentation. If you already have an OGMS account, you'll need to contact your OGMS security contact for access to the 2021-23 Student Emergency Assistant Grant. Should you have questions about how to apply for the funding in OGMS or have other OGMS related questions, please see the user manual under the How To tab in OGMS first. We'll do a brief demo on where to find this helpful document. Actually, we probably won't this time, but it will explain out there in the user manual. And links are available in the slide to help you as well. Most frequently asked OGMS questions will be answered also in the user manual. If your question is not addressed in the manual, start by contacting your organization's security contact. And if your security contact cannot help you, you can go ahead and reach out to me at the state board via email, which is also linked in the slide, or by phone, which is also there.
Thanks so much, Carrie. So in terms of Q&A process, please contact me, Jessica Porter, with all questions related to this funding. My email is jporter@sbctc.edu and is linked in this slide. The Q&A document will be updated with new questions every 48 hours through Thursday, May 6th, and posted on the SBCTC funding web page. This web page is also linked in this slide. And Kate, if you're able, will you please provide that link to the web page in the chat? And I'm certainly able to, let's see if I can navigate to that screen just to demonstrate that if that's helpful. Let me see if I can do that. It is not working. So my apologies for not being able to navigate that, but let's see. Let me try one more time. Let's see. All right. I think you should be seeing the Student Emergency Assistance Grant funding webpage. So hopefully that's what you're seeing right now. But I just wanted to kind of point out there's just some general information about this funding source, all the important dates you need, contact information. You can access the Q&A that we've been referring to, the program guidelines. And soon after this webinar, we'll also process the video recording of this webinar and make it available on this webpage. There are some additional resources and information over here that you can access from this site as well. So hopefully that's going to serve as a resource to you, but also I really want to welcome all of you in being in direct contact with me throughout your application process with any questions. So let me see if I can navigate back to my presentation screen. Okay, I think that works. So, and I think that brings us to the end of our prepared presentation. Thank you all for joining us to find out more about the Student Emergency Assistance Grants Program funding opportunity. With the remaining time, we'll attempt to address some of the questions in the chat. So I know, Kate, you've been keeping a close eye on the chat. So what additional information or clarification can we provide folks?
Yeah, we've got 3 questions so far. One of them is, when you say that direct disbursements aren't grants, do you mean that the amount awarded should not count against a student's financial aid need?
Hold on here. Oops, sorry. So can you read that one more time? I'm gonna try to get my chat screen up too so I can read them along with you. But in the meantime, one more time,
Yeah.
let me see if I am understanding this.
When you say that direct disbursements aren't grants, do you mean that the amount awarded should not count against a student's financial aid need?
So there's a couple pieces there. So so if I said that these are not grants, that was not what I meant to say. I meant to say these should not be considered, they are not considered gifts, and they should be considered grants and should not be repaid to the college. So there were a couple things that I said that maybe it sounded like I was saying grants when I was saying gifts, or but then the second piece is around counting these funds against student financial aid packages, I think.
Correct. Yeah, their financial aid need.
Yeah, so so unfortunately at this point, all of the policy analysis we've done in terms of broader federal financial aid policy indicates that emergency grants do count as estimated financial assistance. And so they do need to be factored into the student's financial aid picture. And we're aware that that's a barrier for some students who maybe don't have room within their financial aid packages. So we're working on digging into that a little deeper, because we know that CARES Act funding and other relief funding is not counting against the students' financial aid packages, and that's because we're in a broader crisis. And so we continue to kind of look at that and see, at a federal level, is there a way for these state emergency aid dollars to not count towards financial aid packages? And we don't have that sorted out yet. That requires a lot more policy work, because it's big and it's federal, and so we're continuing to do our work on our end to look into that. There are certainly other mechanisms that can be utilized by colleges at the local level in terms of like professional judgment and different things like that that can help mitigate some of those issues around students kind of reaching a limit within their financial aid packages. So I hope that helps answer that question. And if not, please do keep them coming. Keep the questions coming in the chat box.
We had another question asking if there are enrollment requirements for receiving funds.
Sure. So thanks for asking that. I would say yes, students are required to be enrolled, and hopefully they're enrolled in an educational program of some kind. So I think we tend to maybe put some brackets around kind of like personal enrichment type courses. But that being said, the majority, if not all of your programs should qualify if or students should be eligible if they're enrolled students at your college. Did I answer that question? Sorry, I'm just trying to get caught up with all these. And there aren't any, there's not a number of credits limit within the SEAG program. It's just that guidance around students need to be enrolled at your college and taking classes, I guess. Educational classes.
We did have a question. It may have already been answered with the gift versus grant clarification. It just says, if these are not grants, what are they?
So I think maybe I misspoke or something happened while I was presenting. It may have not come across clearly because and I can't go back and figure out what I said right now. I'll have to review the video, but let me clarify one more time. So these are not gifts. These are grants to students and should not be paid. And I hope that clarifies. So there have been questions in the past around gifting of state funds, and I think that's really been primarily around the use of gift cards. And I've primarily moved entirely away from that terminology. The use of prepaid cards is an acceptable form of disbursement of funds and sometimes can be really low barrier and accessible for the students. So I think some questions have come up specifically around gift cards, and I'm trying to get away from that terminology entirely. So prepaid cards used for disbursement, totally acceptable. And these, again, the SEAG program funds are not gifts to students, they are grants. It is the Student Emergency Assistance Grants Program or grant program.
All right. Are the funds limited to students in credit courses, whether pursuing a degree or certificate or not?
So again, this funding is not limited. I would say that this funding is not limited to, and I guess I would want to know more about that question. What's meant behind that question? What kinds of courses are you asking about? Is this David who's asking this question? There aren't the parameters. So many of our emergency assistance funds that are run through foundations are, there's some parameters around number of credits and what kind of degree or certificate students are enrolled in, and we do not have that parameter within the SEAG program. We hope that students are pursuing their education, whatever form of education they need to, I guess, advance their careers and their ability to, you know, get jobs that pay living wages. So whatever that looks like. And I guess I would just invite, if there's specific courses that you're asking about, please do unmute and let me know or share it in the chat.
And so, sort of related to that answer then, Jessica, students enrolled in ABE, GED, ESOL, those are okay even though they're typically non-credit classes.
Absolutely. So our basic ed or developmental ed students are 100% eligible for this funding.
And are Running Start and international students now eligible?
So I have issued eligibility clarification within the SEAG program. We took our eligibility question to the Attorney General's office, and really the legislation speaks to enrolled students. So we have not excluded any student categories from that eligibility as long as they're enrolled students. So hopefully that clarifies for folks.
The next question is, do students need to show that they meet our college's satisfactory academic progress requirements? If they owe prior repayment for state or federal funds, could they still receive these funds?
Yeah, thanks for that question too. Again, this funding source is really meant to be flexible for responding to students' emergencies. There is no SAP requirement, and there are no requirements around repayment of debt or anything prior to receiving these funds. These funds are available for students and are meant to respond to students' emergency needs.
If students still owe tuition, can they still receive the grant, and can we fund tuition?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. No, so, and I did not include that in the presentation, so thanks for bringing that up. Tuition is really primarily the only expense that's not allowable within the SEAG program. We do, although it's allowable, books are allowable expense, we do encourage colleges to utilize other funding sources that are available to help support students' needs regarding books, but tuition is not allowable within the SEAG program. And honestly, you know, that seems like more of, so obviously if students still owe tuition, that would be probably an internal barrier at the college that may prevent them or prevent your college from dispersing funds to them. But I would say that is not a barrier within the SEAG program. If a student owes tuition, they would still be eligible for the SEAG program funding. These are good questions.
I don't see additional questions. I see some clarifications shared in the chat. But go ahead, and if I missed any questions, feel free to repost or unmute.
Yeah, and I really hope that what I said about kinds of just that around that credit question. Obviously, you know, that personal enrichment piece, students enrolled in personal enrichment classes, you know, without kind of like an educational pathway or whatever, they're just kind of taking classes for the enjoyment of taking classes. Probably shouldn't be prioritized within the SEAG program because this is really meant for students that, you know, the emergency could really derail their ability to remain enrolled in classes. And, you know, I think, you know, this emergency may impact some people's ability to remain enrolled in personal enrichment courses, but that would certainly not qualify as a priority, I think, in terms of funding. So I hope that clarifies. What other questions do folks have? And do feel free to unmute if you have any other additional questions. All right, well, I think that's a wrap for us then today. Thank you all for joining us for the Student Emergency Assistance Grants Program. Again, wonderful questions. Do please stay in touch with me and let me know what else comes up for you as you complete your applications for this funding opportunity.